Pedowitz Group, and welcome to my show called Get Real with Revenue Marketing. Now, as you guys know by now, I like to have really unique people on the show, really pioneers in what they do. People who are not just doing great things, but are thinking up great things and are really leading the market in how they think and how they apply what they're thinking about. I don't know any other way to put it. So today I'm super excited to have my good friend, Tonya McKinney, on the show. And we're going to talk about funnel bias and how not thinking about data from a biased perspective can really impede the results that you drive. Tonya, I had to write this down. Tonya is the Chief Innovation Officer. Is that not like the coolest title you guys have ever heard of the Salesforce practice at the Tata Consultancy Service? And I will tell you that I've had a chance to know Tonya for quite a while, and we've done some work together. And she is one of the most innovative thinkers out there. So Tonya, welcome to the show.
It's really interesting. We have these conversations all the time, and now we're doing it in front of others.
I know. You know, and it's like Tonya's one of those people that I'm going to talk to her for 6 months, and I get a phone call, Debbie, what do you think about this? And I'm like, oh my God, that's so great. You know, we just have this real think tank going on because we both like to kind of think out there. But Tonya, tell us a little bit about your background first, and then we'll kind of get into the subject matter for today.
Well, I spent most of my career in startups. In fact, mergers, acquisitions, startups. I think I got traded. I feel like I was a part of a startup trading card period from about 1998 through
That's
2000.
right.
Yeah, it's like start a startup, merge, acquire. You know, get beat by a big company, go back out.
Rinse, repeat.
Yeah. So, but in 2009, I actually went to work for what I guess would be one of the big companies, Computer Associates, CA. Yeah, I'd been working on digital strategy with them for a while and social collaboration. And then I got recruited out of there by a COO of a startup that I had helped put a digital portfolio together. They got bought by AT&T within like 18 months. And so he was fond of me and he recruited me into TC. He was running digital strategy. Yes, and he recruited me into TCS. And then, you know, you said great title. I have been fortunate to have some of the most amazing opportunities here at TCS, very entrepreneurial jobs. I started the customer experience practice here. Went on to work with our CTO as an innovation liaison. One of the first innovation liaisons applied to our top 50 accounts. And then was lured into our Salesforce practice as a chief innovation officer.
Lured, yes.
The biggest challenge is explaining to my mother what I do about every
6 months. That's always the biggest problem.
What is it you do again? I don't understand.
Hey, I tell you what I used to, my kids when they were little, Tonya, used to have a hard time because I wasn't a nurse or a fireman or anything like that. And I said, Mama goes to meetings, honey, and makes decisions, right?
I told my mom I did the same. I'm doing the same thing I did like as a kid, and I come up with crazy ideas and see if they work or not. So basically the same thing I did like when I was 10 years old.
There you go, crazy ideas and see if they work. And I have to say one other thing about Tonya. Look at the picture behind her.
Oh, these are my kids.
These are her kids. She is a wonderful equestrian. So tell us about your horses.
Well, the most exciting thing is this little lady right here is making me a new one.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's so exciting.
I just found I'm charting her progress in this website. So it says today that it's the size of a chipmunk. So I'm excited.
Oh, no, I know. You mean they have that for horses now, not just human women,
exactly,
they have horses. That is so funny. That is so funny.
And its little hooves are being formed right now. So I kind of watched the progress.
Cute. That is so cute. What to expect when you're expecting week by week for the horse?
It takes a little longer. It can go almost a full year.
Oh wow! And they're jumpers, right?
I do dressage, jumping, cross country. That's called eventing. So we dabble. It's the fun I think it's fun because you dabble in a lot of different things, and
Right.
we don't
Right.
specialize in any one thing.
Well, I think that's special, and I just wanted to call that out for everybody because I'm kind of jealous, right?
Well, I think, I was going to say these sorts of, I tell people you're constantly a beginner in innovation. And that's this one thing about, I'd taken like a 20-year hiatus from horseback riding, and I'm an abject novice beginner ground level. And it's actually really good to have something in your life that you're a beginner at again, because in innovation, it's like I have to learn how to be a beginner over and over and over.
I agree. And that's a lifelong learner. So anyway, let's talk about data and let's talk about bias. You called me up like a month ago and you said, Debbie, what do you think about this idea? So tell us about it.
Well, I've been involved in diversity and inclusion. Sorry about I have a puppy dog that wants to intrude, but I have been involved in diversity inclusion programs for a while. But I started to just think about it a little bit more broadly in terms of what is the real cost and consequence? And a lot of research, we've talked about this, cost and consequence of, I beg your pardon, Debbie. 1 second, sorry.
I saw the McKinsey. She sent me a McKinsey report. It was May 2020. And McKinsey's been doing research on the value of diversity since about 2015. And the numbers were actually stunning, both in terms of gender and also racial diversity.
Well, the gap's getting wider every year they do it. So it's going to be interesting to see what this year looks like. I think it was they did the data from 2019, released the report early this year. And diversity in terms of culture, ethnicity, the top quartile is outperforming the bottom quartile by 36%.
Isn't that crazy? By 36%, right? And that was on overall diversity. It was about 23% just on gender diversity, I think.
Yeah, that gap, if you're looking at the top most gender diverse companies and the bottom, that's actually a spread in the 40s. I think it's around 48%. So that's why and that's really one of the only consistent report I've seen measuring the impact of diversity on company performance. I think we all have a social aspiration to have more diverse teams. The core of that, as we've talked about, is that cognitive diversity, which improves innovation, right?
Yes.
Improves performance, decision making. So we
need to stop and talk about cognitive diversity. Tonya mentioned that to me when we talked a couple of weeks ago, and I got chills. I got chills when I heard the term because it makes so much sense. So give me a little bit more of an explanation around cognitive diversity and why we need to consider that.
So the research shows that anytime you have a homogenous group, and we're really thinking about, you have similar backgrounds, similar understanding, similar business experiences. We see this in venture capital groups all the time. They get a bunch of like-minded people together and they make investment decisions and they fail. Because groupthink, the yes men syndrome start to activate, and that actually undermines the decision capability. So having people that come at it from a multifaceted views, experiences, different backgrounds, that actually improves both your decision-making capabilities and your innovation. And that improves overall company performance. But we started digging down into, so how exactly does that undermine actual revenue? We have a social aspiration, but we believed that there was a material impact on company revenue if you don't have the diversity manifested in cognitive diversity throughout the customer experience in the funnel. So that's what we started unpacking. I think the McKinsey report is really interesting because it shows the final revenue, profit, performance numbers.
Right.
But what's underneath that, right? Peel back the next layer. What's exactly going on there that actually undermines the revenue and the profit? So that's what we've been spending a lot of time digging into and trying to understand.
So let's talk about data bias and funnel bias as it applies to marketers. And I just did a show recently with Mike Rizzo, who started a community called MoPros. And these are marketing operations professionals. And we were talking about data and how marketers, they still struggle with data, right? And so now there's another thing to consider about their data. So how does bias show up in data, and what could and should marketers be doing to counteract that?
So this has been a tough self-examination for me, just starting to unpack exactly where bias is operating. And
it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Yeah. We all have biases.
And I told someone I've never cried in application development. I've cried a couple of times in this process because unpacking MarTech, unpacking our marketing operations processes and our list building and buying revealed to me that I have long been a biased marketer. Mm-hmm. And just I didn't see it, Debbie, at the time, and it's extremely uncomfortable to know that, that I too have contributed to this. I mean, I've built MarTech tools mm-hmm. and I've built them, on base assumptions that contributed to that bias. So, I mean, one of the key areas is we don't really understand the diversity profile of the market we're going after. And we don't use it and think about it. So to understand what the gender designations are throughout mm-hmm. that market, the cultures, the ethnic groups, the disabilities mm-hmm. at play. I mean, this was very interesting to me to learn that 25% of our population is considered to have a disability at any one time. Mm-hmm. So you have to get for that.
I think I introduced you to Toby Murdoch, who has a new organization called Highway Education. And his goal is to give disadvantaged populations access to a tech education, marketing operations specifically. And he has told me stories about the folks that have his first cadre is coming through right now. And he's just told me the most incredible stories about people with disabilities who really had, very little career potential and who are now just knocking it out of the park, right? But he had to proactively think about that and look for those people.
Right. I mean, I did actually talk to Toby. You introduced us. I thank you for that. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping we can actually help with some recruitment and job placement out of his first cohort. But I think it's what he's doing is it's a great example of how we don't mean to, it's not intentional, but we leave groups out. A bit of it's like the 80-20 rule, right? We're designing mm-hmm. for the 80%, right? So when you think about marketing, and it's much like that. I mean, are you really marketing to the 25% of the population that might have a hearing disability or mm-hmm. visually? And then when you start adding up all of these diverse subsegments that it may seem okay to not target, then that ends up being 20, 30, 40% of your market. I mean, that was one of the most disconcerting things about this. For most of our marketing lives, we've been focused on, quite honestly, a Caucasian male, mm-hmm. Middle class, upper middle class, mm-hmm. Management right. title. And, this is a continuous reinforcement circle of that focus.
Yes.
So our events get designed for that culture, that gender, mm-hmm. right, those capabilities. Our list purchases get designed for that. The list managers are focused on our targets and what we've been doing historically. So So we're chasing a large segment, but a large sub-segment over and over and over and over again.
Well, and I want to challenge that for a minute, because the McKinsey report, again, great on what happens at a revenue level, but we're talking about leadership in a company, right? So to me, that's a little bit different than who we're marketing to, right?
Right. So
I'm just playing devil's advocate on that one.
No,
Tonya,
but how do I? So a recent challenge we went through was something like 36% of small to medium-sized enterprise are owned by people of color. And companies are struggling to capture that segment, right? So
that's really interesting, because we have one client, a really large client, and they have one of their marketing channels is to the small business owner, right? And I have no idea if they do anything based on diversity whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. And but if you were, so say, Debbie, we're going to go advise them, so if 36% of small to medium-sized enterprises are people of color, then you're going to want that diversity reflected in your content and your messages. You're going to want that reflected in, your sales teams, and service teams. And really, I mean, I'm going to circle back to that cognitive diversity. That you have to have that sort of mental agility to work with all types of people in our society, right?
So let me ask you another question about that. So I was recently working with a client, and we were creating some basic personas, who should you market to, right? And we did include background. We did not include anything around diversity, right? And I have worked with companies that would say, it's just going to be a white, middle-aged man. That's, who we're going after. So if I'm listening to you, they really should be thinking more about these different cultures and the diversity, and include that as part of their personas.
Agreed. And you've probably seen this. I've seen this happen sometimes. I've seen it happen with agencies when I was leading marketing that I'd hired, in which they actually kind of do a persona, and they just slap a picture on it of a person of color or a woman, right? But you didn't actually design that persona and that customer experience for that gender or ethnicity or background, right?
Right.
So,
right. See it all the time. You're just checking the boxes, right?
I think if you want to, so let's go back to that challenge of 36% of the small and medium-sized enterprises are owned by people of color. Then wouldn't you create some sub-personas for that area? Wouldn't you create a customer experience, a customer journey specifically for ethnicities?
I would absolutely positively think you should.
I mean, if we're serving our client to help them capture the greatest percentage of that market share, then I think that we would be doing that.
Right.
But very few agencies are doing that right now.
Well, and agencies, and even within marketing organizations, I mean, I tell them 100% of the time, you have to go out and talk to these customers. Once you can create a straw person persona, but then you have to go out and talk to them and say, is this you? Because you don't know. And that's just, Caucasian to Caucasian, right? You go to people with disabilities, you go to other people, that have more diversity. You sure as heck don't know what they're about, right?
Debbie, I think that's sort of like I think it's great that you recommend that, first of all, because that's going to help with inclusive design thinking, right? Just like in any design thinking activity, you're going to have your observational engagement. You're going to look, engage, talk to those live customers in that scenario. And I think what you're advising is that same sort of design thinking observation activity around personas and the sort of profiling you do, which that drives everything you do.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And again, I just go back to this one company, that has a large segment of their universe is the small to medium sized business owner. And I I have I don't think anything really around diversity is part of that. I mean, they might promote like, Black Lives Matter or something, but I don't think they really have thought about this from a messaging, marketing, design, experience perspective.
Well, and it's gonna be hard for us to help companies as they become more aware of this, because you're talking about the data.
Mm-hmm.
So you go back, you talk to this client, you show them the demographics, the diversity breakdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does their database look like right now? What
They
are the
couldn't tell
gaps?
you. They couldn't tell you.
And
Again,
then
the
how do
data.
you fill it?
Yeah, most marketers have bad data to begin with, and then adding that whole element to it is just, I mean, again, I don't know why marketers have just drugged their feet on getting good data. All they do is just, yell about it and wave their hands around, right? But they've got to, I mean, you cannot be a marketer today without good data. And then this is just another cut of data, and it's all about the experience for the customer, right? Customer experience has become so important. It was important prior to the pandemic. It's way more important now post pandemic for a lot of different reasons. But if you're not thinking about the diversity and the diverse people that you are interacting with, how can you possibly be having optimized customer experiences or tailored customer experiences? You're not, right?
I, it's interesting because demographics have run their course. I mean, we've mined as much value as we can out of
Yeah.
demographics. I mean, again, there's a social aspiration to being a diverse company and serving diverse markets.
Mm-hmm.
There's as we've detailed, there's a revenue aspect to that. There's a
Mm-hmm.
cost if you are not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the challenge is still in how you're going to fill those gaps. I was just reviewing an ad agency that has made a commitment to spend 2% of their placement with Black-owned media. Now, everyone's like, well, this is great. I said, but this also tells us how bad the problem is.
Yeah.
That's a significant spend number
Yeah.
that clients are obviously pushing them to help them reach that audience. But why do you have to make such a special effort to include Black-owned media? Because you haven't historically, right?
Right.
They're not being
Right.
engaged, included. So when you
Right.
you do media buys, you think you could just buy your way into diverse marketplaces. And they're not there because they haven't historically been part of
Mm-hmm.
the affiliate advertising
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem. They have been marginalized and left out.
So what you're talking about is organizations who are talk but no action, right? And when we think about our unconscious bias that we carry with us, and again, we all do it. It's 100%. Because I thought a lot about this through the years, and you are what you are, so you have to be always aware. You just have to be aware of differences. You just have to, as much as you can, be and ask and find out about differences. You can't run away from differences. And I've always been a big, you know like if I look at my team, if everybody looks, walks, and talks just like me, we are in deep trouble, right? This, you can't have that homogenous thinking. But I want to come back to your aha moments, because you were sharing that you haven't cried in a long time in an app development. Is there something you could share more specific about what that was like in your aha moment?
Well, I was taking some folks through. I mean, we've been meeting every day for months on this, and unpacking really that marketing operations activities. I was having to dig way back. So
Mm-hmm.
when I pull a list, when I create an audience in a email marketing campaign, when I get my responses. And then it was occurring to me, I was like, yeah, but I pulled that list out of that database that we built out of our marketing events, which we didn't even, I remember somewhere in the 2003, 2004, we started this events team was adding spa days for the spouses, Debbie, because it was all golf and it was all designed for a very specific target.
Right.
So the list, our database was built that way. I'm pulling out of that database. I'm only getting responses based on, and it's just completely circular.
Yeah.
And what I realized
it just feeds on itself, right? Yeah.
How many people of color were in tech buying positions at the time? How many women? If I had stopped and been able, had my eyes open then, I would guess that I probably could have had unfettered access to 15% of the marketplace by just focusing on more diverse groups. But instead, I just kept chasing around the same group, me and all
just like everybody else. Yeah, just like everybody else was doing.
What kind of competitive advantage could I have built by designing for women IT leaders or IT, people of color in IT positions? I could have potentially, I think about this. What would that have done about the products we had designed? What would that would have changed our events and marketing? And then how big would our database have grown? And how would have I customized my programs and my experience? Like once you feed those in, you can see how it all.
Absolutely. So I was working with a company last year, to be unnamed, and they wanted to sell to a different stakeholder, within their industry. And so I was interviewing some of the executives and the salespeople, and I said, we're seeing more women in that role. And instantly my ears perk up. I'm like, great, we can do something just for women. It'll be a small select group. Got shut down. Didn't want to do anything with it, just too much work, too much effort. Let's just keep it simple, right? They just didn't see the value in it.
I came across, also to remain named, a report on digital advertising, and it's an audience overlap report. So, but you have to make a decision, right, Debbie, about what overlaps what, right? So what's the common denominator in the report that we're looking about? Who overlaps with who? Well, the common denominator was white males with iPhones. And then everything else was analyzed against that core group because they saw white males with iPhones. But somewhere that decision gets made in a system, and it gets coded, and it gets operationalized.
Yeah.
You apply AI to it, and it just amplifies that initial biased decision bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. So, we talked about a lot of things, but what advice do you give to a CMO in an organization, especially a B2B organization, who is sitting there listening to this interview thinking, oh my God, I've been doing this. What advice would you give them? What steps do they need to take?
So first of all, you have to understand what is that. How does your target market and markets, there may be multiple target markets that you're looking at, what is the diversity breakout for that? What are the ratios and the profiles that you're looking at? Because that's going to tell you how big your opportunity is here, really. To me, this is uncovered marketplace, untapped market share.
Yeah.
Right. So that's, and it's funny when I pitch a product to, whoever I'm working for at the time, I don't say, oh, by the way, and I'm going to leave 20% of the women out, and I'm going to not touch 15% of Hispanics. I don't say that, but that's not my database. Seldom is, right? I pitch the whole marketplace when I do my business case and revenue modeling, right? So job one is, what does that marketplace look like in terms of diversity?
Yeah.
Then what does my database and media and lists look like? Does it match up? Where are the gaps? And then you have to work on gaps. And I think that's a little bit of the challenge there. But you pointed out another challenge. One of the challenges is understanding where the gaps are, which is obviously revenue potential. And then what can you actually act on to solve it? I mean, it is kind of disappointing to hear that there's a significant market of women in that target you were discussing, but they didn't do anything. And it may be because the difficulty to them of appealing to women seemed maybe insurmountable, Debbie?
Yeah, I think it was. It was just.
Is that because they had a homogenous sales team?
Very homogenous sales team.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So if I think back that the core of the issue, you said what was affecting me, and when I realized that I had just been reinforcing this at one point in my career, and why didn't I see this? Because now it seems so obvious, right? But that cognitive diversity. If I made sure that my team had diversity, the cognitive diversity,
yep,
I would have.
I'm looking for my book.
I would have probably solved this problem earlier.
Yeah, I got the book. It just came in. I can't find it. Oh yeah, I thought I had it right here with me, but it's here somewhere. So I bought a book on teaching people innovation. This is something that Tonya told me about.
Oh, right.
So it's how to inspire that cognitive diversity through innovation thinking and models, which we're actually having a leadership meeting next week, and I'm going to bring this into my team to talk about next week. That's just how I'm
great.
So yeah.
I think that cognitive diversity, I mean, it can be learned, right? You can teach yourself to look at things in so many different ways. And we do, I do a bunch of exercises with people now, and we take the problem. I think I mentioned this, and we sign teams to use different ways to think about it. So they can't just go back to the one version that they prefer, right? They have to learn a new way of thinking about it.
Absolutely.
But I think that's key to there are some steps between your market share, your database and media. What are your responses? Do they reflect what the market, diversity looks like? You can monitor those KPIs, but
I think the most important thing is to begin the discussion, right? Within your organization, just to recognize the issues and begin the discussion. That's where it all starts. And I think we're all trying to be more conscious about diversity, as we should be. And I think it just, as we know, the data shows it makes for a much stronger company. So anyway.
It does. I would leave you with a hopeful thought to your
point.
The company you mentioned before, you said you have to have the conversation. I imagine there's going to be a future where they're like, we need to grow our revenue. And someone's going to say, well, we have an untapped market. And then they've had the conversation, Debbie.
Yeah.
At some point they will make the move.
I do too. I think they will. I think they will. So anyway, well, Tonya, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for making us all think about how we are working as marketers. And thank you for your vision. And hopefully you'll be having a white paper or some research or something coming out.
We got some stuff going on.
We're good.
To help folks quantify this.
Since you've got it, I'm happy to make it available to the world. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Debbie.
And that's our show for Get Real with Revenue Marketing, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.